and wise speech. It's a duality that we as Toastmasters need to be aware of. But just what is wise speech, or what is unwise speech? Where did this concept of being wise or unwise in your speech come from? What are the qualities of unwise speech or wise speech? And how do we take wise speech or unwise speech and incorporate it into our daily practices to lead a more wise and compassionate life? And how do we define wise speech? It's the first question. These are things that I'm going to go over today. Defining it, what is the concept, what are the qualities, and how do we put it into our lives? So the first thing is, how do we define it? The Buddha defined it like this. Wise speech is speech that is spoken at the right time. Wise speech is spoken in truth. It is spoken affectionately. It is spoken beneficially. It is spoken with the mind of goodwill. Wise speech is a practice in mindfulness. Through practicing wise speech, we are learning how to think about what we are going to say before we say it. When we become wise in the practice of speech, we are able to decide when to speak, what to say, and when to say it. Wise speech teaches that the heart, not the mind, is the true source from which speech grows. Proverbs 16:23 says that a wise man's heart guides his speech. Speech comes from the heart, not the head. Unwise speech has been taught in the Buddhist tradition for decades, for years, for thousands of years. Speech has been taught by Buddhism in their three main precepts of education, their traditional trainings, which are ethics, meditation, and wisdom. We pick up descriptions of unwise speech from the 9th commandment in the Bible. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Unwise speech tends to come from the negative. The Buddhism says we are to abstain from unwise speech. The Bible says we are to abstain from false speech. So there is a duality that is developing here between, on the one hand, learning that speech, that we are to abstain from wise speech, from unwise speech, and not bear false witness, negative aspects. What this does is it begs for our attention to understand that not only is there positiveness in wise speech, there is positiveness in looking to eliminate unwise speech. And I'm going to give you illustrations of this duality as we go on. At the same time as there is also negativeness that applies to wise speech, there's positiveness to it. We see many times in the Bible and all books of tradition that we are taught that wise speech is truthful speech, it's helpful speech, it's beneficial speech. So wise speech is a duality, and we are asked to be aware of not only the unwise side of that duality in speech to improve our speech, but the wise side of duality. And where does it come from? Buddha was teaching wise speech 5 centuries before the Christ. The Bible speaks of wise and compassionate speech, as does the Quran. Wise speech and unwise speech come from our teachers, from our way showers, from the writings and teachings that they have passed down to us through our ancestors and through our families, and that we are to pass down to our offspring and our families. So what are the qualities of wise speech, and how do we engage in them as daily practices? 500 years ago, 500 years before the Christ, Buddha was teaching a way of being. When he started to teach to the people that came to him, rules were set up for basically the monks and the nuns that were in the monasteries and that were coming for his teachings. These rules were designed for governing daily life. They were designed to teach what to eat, how to handle money, and how to be, what linens to wear, the simple daily tasks of life 2,000 to 3,000 years ago. As those rules became more and more studied, they progressed to where there were over 200 of them, and they were codified into what are called precepts or guidelines, how to lead a wise and compassionate life. Those precepts, out of those precepts, basically 5 teachings of Buddhism came to pass. From the precepts, and this is language translated from the language of Buddha, which was Pali, P-A-L-I, and this is how it was expressed. For those 5 precepts that became the predominant teachings of Buddhism, the first one, and how they pronounced them, was for the sake of training. Buddhism takes a look at, they are in practice and they are in training all their life. For the sake of training, I undertake the precept to abstain from the taking of life. That's their number 1 precept. For the sake of training, I undertake the precept not to take that which is not given. For the sake of training, I undertake the precept to abstain from sexual misconduct. For the sake of training, I undertake the precept to abstain from unwise speech. This is what we're talking about today. And the 5th one, for the sake of training, I undertake to abstain from intoxicants that cause heedlessness. I was hoping Rich Delaney would be here. So these precepts developed out of the rules that were set down to lead a compassionate and wise life. Now, as you can see, this is the unwise, the negative side of abstaining. It says we are to take that from our life. We are to remove it from our life. From this, the Buddha developed basically 4 ideas that are the main unwise qualities of speech. The first one is false speech, which distorts. Second one, malicious speech, which creates division. Third one, harsh speech, which is disagreeable. 4th one, gossip, which is inappropriate. From that, unwise speech to wise speech, the duality starts to show itself. Unwise speech, we're asked to eliminate something from our speech. Wise speech, we're asked to add something to our speech. When we concentrate on our unwise speech and we try to eliminate or reduce false speech, what shows up is truthful, reliable speech to take its place. When we concentrate on eliminating or reducing malicious speech, what shows up is that we are uniters, that we have concord in life. Harsh speech, disagreeable speech, what shows up is gentleness and pleasing to the ear speech. When we concentrate on reducing gossip and inappropriate speech, what shows up is timely, factual speech. From these 2 dual ideas, David Rothberg, in his book, The Engaged Spiritual Life, brought forth the simplest definition of the qualities of wise speech. From here, when false speech turns to truthful speech, we are talking truthfulness. When malicious speech unites, turns to uniting, we are helping, turns to helpfulness. When harsh speech starts to turn gentle, and those are attributes that we incorporate into our daily routine, we start to exhibit kindness and goodwill. When gossip turns to factual, timely, we are speaking appropriateness. So now what you have in front of you is a timely, presentation of what the qualities of wise speech are. How do you incorporate those into your life? One way that you might consider doing it is write these down as age-old qualities and the simplest definition of wise speech. Put them next to your telephone. When you make that telephone call or someone calls, try to come from one of these. I'm not saying that you want to try to improve all these at once. You know your strengths. You may be best at helpfulness, but you know that maybe your appropriateness could be worked on that call or in your relationships in your family. Do that. Another thing you might try with gossip, don't talk about somebody that's not in your presence for a day. If you can do it for a day, try to do it for 2 days. If you can do it for 2, try to do it for 3. Incorporate these into your life and practice them. The Buddha teaches training and practice. What this takes is practice, practice, practice. Thank you very much.